This 2000 horsepower hypercar just broke 23 world records and is the fastest accelerating car ever created. Today we explore the insane physics of the Rimac Nevera and deep dive to see how exactly this battery works. So how does this car make 2000 horsepower? I want to give you a quick intro to the Rimac Nevera. It has two electric motors in the front and two in the rear. The two motors in the front make about 600 horsepower. The two motors in the rear make about 1300 horsepower. So you're talking about 1.4 megawatts of power, which is 1900 horsepower. And that's all coming from a 120 kilowatt hour battery pack, which we're going to focus on in this video. So capacity is 120 kilowatt hours, 1400 kilowatt hours peak discharge power. It charges at up to 500 kilowatts, and it's made up of almost 7,000 cells in the 21700 form factor, which means that each cell is about 21 millimeters in diameter and about 70 millimeters high. So we're first going to start at the cell level, and then we're going to build our way up to the pack level. Rimac doesn't specify exactly what cells they use. They say they use 2170 cells from a variety of manufacturers. So what I did is find the most power and energy dense 2170 cell I could find online. I could go and purchase a bunch of these cells today. So these are very real figures. Nominal voltage, 3.6 volts. Capacity, 16.2 watt hours. Peak discharge rate, 45 amps. Power output, 184 watts. Energy density, 242 watt hours per kilogram. So we know the Rimac Nevera has 6,960 cells as stated on their website. You could simply multiply that by the capacity of each cell, and you see that you'd get about 113 kilowatt hour battery pack. Same thing with power, multiply 6,960 by 184 watts per cell, and you get 1.28 megawatts or about 1,717 horsepower. But we know Rimac is claiming 120 kilowatt hours of capacity and 1.4 megawatts of peak output. So what we're going to do is assume about a 10% performance increase over this Molicel 21700. We're going to assume they have the best possible cells and they're able to squeeze a little bit more performance out than the best performing cell that I could buy as a consumer. I was able to find a lot of information from Rimac factory tours on YouTube actually. And so this pack is broken up into big and small modules. Starting with the small module, it's 6 groups of 40 cells in series. So you could call it a 6S40P. You can see the color combination there. It alternates red and blue, and each one of those colors is a group of cells in parallel. So with cells in series, you add voltage together, and for cells in parallel, you add current together. So we have 6 groups in series multiplied by 3.6 volts. That's the nominal voltage of each cell. You get 21.6 volts in this module. And then since we have 40 cells in parallel, multiply that by 55 amps, which is the peak discharge rate, you get 2200 amps in this module. So total power, you multiply voltage times current, and you get 47.52 kilowatts. Capacity, really simple calculation. Number of cells multiplied by the capacity of each cell, you get 4.13 kilowatt hours. The big module is pretty simple. It's basically 2 small modules together. Keep in mind that the shape and orientation of the cells is not exactly how it is in this diagram. They're more triangular and closer together to save space. So we have 12 groups of 40 cells in series. Again, it's literally 2 of the small modules together in series. Voltage is doubled at 43.2 volts. Current is the same at 2200 amps. And so peak power output climbs to 95 kilowatts, and capacity is doubled obviously at 8.26 kilowatt hours. So the pack's made up of these big and small modules, but then you have to put those modules together to actually create the pack. So now we're going to jump from module level to the section level, which is basically just 3 sections of the pack that are physically put together. I'll try to put some visuals on the screen to make this more clear. In the rear, we have the biggest section by far. We have 4 vertical levels of 2 big and 1 small module. That brings the rear to 8 big modules and 4 small, which is 4,800 cells. So this is a huge battery just in the back. The configuration here is 120S40P. Again, that's 120 cells in series, 40 in parallel. Voltage, the same exact formula. We get 432 volts and we get 950 kilowatts of peak output from this rear section. Capacity is also big. It's about the same size as a Model 3, Model Y battery pack, 82.5 kilowatt hours. So this section in the rear is by far the biggest section in the pack. And then there's 2 more smaller sections. In the front, under where the feet are of the driver, you have 4 small modules totaling 960 cells. This configuration is 24S40P. You can see the numbers on your screen. I won't go through all the calculations now that we've done them, but you see 190 kilowatts of peak power and 16.5 kilowatt hours of capacity. And then the third and final section, there's 2 small modules stacked next to 3 small modules stacked. So it gives you 5 small modules, which is 1,200 cells. Configuration is 30S40p, and then you do all the calculations again, and you see power is 237 kilowatts and capacity is 20.64 kilowatt hours. So we're going to put these 3 sections together. We have the huge section in the rear, the small section in the front, and the middle section, which kind of goes over the front and connects the 2 together. Total capacity, just under 120 kilowatt hours. Peak output, just under 1,400 kilowatts. And peak voltage, 731 volts. That would only occur while charging. One thing we haven't talked about yet is the weight of this pack. We know these cells are about 70 grams per cell. So again, the math's pretty easy there. You could do 70 grams a cell multiplied by the number of cells, and you see that the cell weight, so not the entire pack weight, is about 1,074 pounds. But how do we know the weight of the entire pack? With the casing, wiring, cooling, etc., there's a lot of other components than just the battery cells. It's pretty much impossible to calculate unless you know the weight of all of those individual components. So what I did is I went to the EPA's website, and they actually have the specific energy of battery packs for all EVs. And the EPA lists the Rimac Nevera battery pack at 168 watt hours per kilogram specific energy. And so we know the capacity, so that makes it really easy to calculate the weight. You take 120 kilowatt hours divided by 0.68 kilowatt hours per kilogram, and you get 1,575 pounds. The battery pack is incredibly impressive when you look at it on its own, but when you start comparing it to other cars, other EVs that are out right now, it becomes a lot less impressive. The Tesla Model S has a specific energy at a pack level of about 186, Lucid Air 171, and of course we just went through the Nevera at 168. The Rimac is able to pull more power per kilowatt hour. It's a little disappointing when you consider this is a $2 million hypercar that has one goal in mind, which is speed. I think the reason for the somewhat disappointing energy density is because of all of the cooling required. You can see in this video there's a lot of coolant lines running, and the pack is also assembled in a really undesirable way. It would be way easier to just make a skateboard and make everything much more compact. So the pack weight is over 1,500 pounds, and that brings the curb weight of this 2-seater hypercar to 5,070 pounds, which is very heavy. For reference, a Tesla Model X weighs just under 100 pounds more at 5,150 pounds. So you're talking about a 2-seat hypercar that weighs almost as much as an all-electric SUV. It's definitely a little bit disappointing, but nonetheless, the battery pack in this car is still impressive. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive of the most powerful EV currently in the world. Let me know what you think about the Nevera down below. Drop a like if you learned something, and I'll see you guys next time.